All right, let's look at some news articles. So there's an event, Windows Event Log 0 Day. If you have an account on any machine, for example, a non-administrative account in a domain, you can send a signal through the network and shut off the event log service on any machine. So, and they've reported this to Microsoft, and they don't seem to care. So there's now an unofficial patch. These guys make unofficial zero-day patches, which I've never used those. That seems like a pretty extreme thing to do. But anyway, that is an option. A low-privilege attacker can crash the event log service. However, that's an interesting vulnerability, and that would, of course, stop things like Splunk from getting it, your SIEM. If the event logger is not running, you won't be forwarding those events to Splunk either, presumably. So that's an interesting one. There are several court decisions which show that they're beginning to have some idea of standard requirements for security and punish people who don't have it. So they punished this company called Blackbaud, saying they're so insecure they let their data get stolen, and despite promising that they take appropriate procedural safeguards to protect your information, they didn't put in, they didn't monitor the network. So they didn't notice that the hacker breached their network. They didn't segment the data. I think they probably mean the next work. They didn't have multi-factor authentication. They didn't ensure that old data was deleted when it's no longer needed, and so on. So these are the standard requirements, and it's beginning to be legally expected for you to have these requirements, which is definitely a step forward. Security is slowly solidifying into a sort of standard set of expectations, which can in fact be enforced in court. And let's see if there's any way to get past the ads. All right. So this one I was sort of surprised at. There's an Ivanti VPN appliance, and apparently federal agencies have it, and it has a vulnerability which is pretty serious, but there are workarounds and such. But the federal agency has ordered them all to disconnect their VPN appliance by Saturday. So that's pretty extreme, and that means I think people will lose the ability to work remotely until they can get a different appliance. So that's pretty extreme. And but I guess they haven't patched the 0 days. They do explain the process you have to do to fix it. You have to like reset the firmware to known to factory defaults and restart it and so on. Anyway, that's something to know about. It reminds me of the SolarWinds, not SolarWinds, but the Log4j attack came out, and there was a huge push for all federal agencies to report within like a week all machines that were using that product, and that was quite a job for them. I knew some friends working at federal agencies that had to put in a lot of work over that. And again, here's Citibank sued for failure to protect their customers. And again, it's just failure to follow the standard best practices. They exploited exceptions. Citi's negligence allowed scammers to steal millions of dollars. And I thought there were some details of what they failed to do. There we are. They failed to notice suspicious funds transfers, which is a standard procedure. I mean, this is the main protection for credit cards, is you notice suspicious transactions. So they were supposed to react to attackers using unrecognized devices, coming in from new locations, even when changing banking credentials. So this is the sort of thing that the iPhone's new device theft prevention mode or something like that has come out, where it will notice if you're logging in from an unexpected location and block you from changing the password. They also failed to flag obviously suspicious transactions and so on. So that's interesting that this is now required, and you can get punished in court for not doing it. And so the UK is pushing forward a law called the Investigatory Powers Bill, and this will force companies to warn the government if they make any change which would negatively impact their ability to comply with the warrant. And the tech companies are screaming and saying this will prevent them from innovating. I must say I don't immediately see it, because you do have to respond to a warrant. So it is logical to say that if you somehow change your system so your data is gone and you can't respond to a warrant, that would be a problem. It doesn't seem like it's really anything very drastic, but they are getting mad about it. And there was one that I had to put in a private mode. There we are. So this startup was pretty well known. There's an Indian startup that worked as a hacker for hire team, hacking everybody, deploying malware and so on, and they operated that way for years, and then they tried to clean up and become legitimate. They were called Appen Technology, and it was a similar name. They're now trying to be a legitimate company, and Reuters did a big investigation, publishing a big article explaining their previous history of being a criminal organization. So they sued, and they forced Reuters to take down that article. And then somebody else wrote an article about the Reuters article, and they're suing to order them to take down that article. And I wonder when Wired will get sued for writing an article about that article. And so it's interesting from a sort of free speech point of view. It's apparently very clear that they actually did this, but the question is, to what extent are you allowed to prevent it? And I think they sued in India and got Reuters to take it down. But anyway, that's, yeah.
A question about the Appen Training Center. What kind of training do they provide?
I don't know.
Because I'm reading what you're, so in the background, I'm reading it, and it says Appen Training Center.
Well, Appen Training Center is the criminals. So,
okay. So it's not a legitimate coding camp?
Well, it might be. I mean, they're trying to reform. They were a criminal gang years ago. Now they're trying to reform as a legitimate security company. And they don't like people pointing out what they used to be. It reminds me of one of the major cigarette companies rebranded with a different name like Altria or something. So people would not remember that they're a cigarette company. So, anyway, it's interesting, both from the point of view of people trying to reform, like, the NSO group was famous for spreading malware that was used by repressive governments, and now they're trying to get accepted again on the grounds that their technology is necessary for the war between Israel and Gaza. And so these companies that are shady and you try to push them out of the business, they often try to come back, and they might succeed. Certainly, with Donald Trump's help, the Prince of Saudi Arabia was able to completely erase his reputation and move back in after murdering an American. So it was, and Trump said that's why he got all the money from him. He was basically paid to do that for him, and it worked. So it's possible to recover from a bad reputation sometimes, yeah.
Actually, the people that carried out the execution were executed themselves, and the prince was forced to pay compensation to the family of the deceased.
Yes, he did that. But still, it was very clear that he ordered it. And Biden promised to make him a pariah, and then within a year was there hat in hand begging him to give him more oil, because the fact is our relationship with Saudi Arabia is so important that it kind of overrides human rights considerations, which is true of a lot of our allies. And anyway, all right, so there's a few news stories. Let me stop this.